My father-in-law accepted my grueling, unpaid labor for 3 years, calling it family duty. But when he handed my life's work to a wealthy intern to appear innovative, I didn't scream. I simply activated the hidden legal clauses that turned his corporate empire into dust. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The voice echoed through the frosted glass of the executive conference room, booming with that specific, performative baritone that was designed to fill a room, but usually just sucked the oxygen out of it. Innovation comes from youth, Raymond was saying. It comes from fresh eyes, not legacy habits. I stopped dead in the hallway. My hand was hovering over the door handle, a stack of quarterly logistical reports tucked under my arm, reports that represented 3 straight weeks of 14-hour days, missed dinners, and a level of caffeine consumption that my doctor had explicitly warned me against. I could picture him perfectly on the other side of that glass. Full-chested, leaning back in his leather chair, gesturing with a Mont-Blanc pen he rarely used for writing, pitching his TED Talk philosophy to a room full of nodding bobbleheads who were too afraid of losing their bonuses to point out that his legacy habits were the only reason they had payroll liquidity this month. "We need to be agile," Raymond continued, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "We need the kind of energy that doesn't look at a clock. That's why I'm thinking we pivot the lead on the Apex initiative. Bring in someone hungry." My stomach turned over. It wasn't a gentle lurch. It was a violent, physical drop, like missing a step on a staircase in the dark. The Apex initiative wasn't just a project. It was my project. It was the comprehensive logistics overhaul I had pitched, designed, and built from the ground up. It was the reason I was currently standing in a hallway at 6:45 p.m. on a Friday while my husband, his son, was likely already at the bar waiting for me. "But Alina has been structuring the vendor architecture for 6 months. A quiet voice interjected. It was Sarah from accounting, God bless her terrified soul. Raymond's laugh was dismissive, a short bark of amusement. "Alina is steady, she's functional. She's fantastic at keeping the lights on, and we appreciate that. But she's family. She's the daughter-in-law. She doesn't have the fire of the new generation. She's a cost saver, not a visionary. No, I'm talking about real potential. I'm talking about Mitch's boy, Cole." The air in the hallway seemed to thin. I leaned against the wall, the cold plaster seeping through my blouse, grounding me as the room began to spin. Functional daughter-in-law. That was it. That was the summary of my existence in the Vance logistics empire. To Raymond, I wasn't the director of operations who had increased profit margins by 22% year-over-year. I wasn't the strategist who had negotiated exclusive contracts with suppliers that hadn't returned his calls in a decade. I was just Julian's wife. I was the help. I was the reliable, uncomplaining mule who carried the heavy loads up the mountain, so the kings could ride ponies to the summit and claim they conquered the peak. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. If I walked in there now, with the taste of bile in my throat and the sound of my own heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I would have said things that couldn't be unsaid. I turned around. I walked back to my cubicle, not an office, despite my title, but a cubicle, and set the reports down on the desk. My hands were trembling. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. It was a rejection of my identity, a dismissal of my intellect, and a cruel reminder that in a family business, blood wasn't just thicker than water. It was thicker than merit, thicker than profit, and certainly thicker than justice. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was the realization that the disease was the family I had married into. The drive home was a blur of red taillights and rain that I barely registered. By the time I walked into our kitchen, the silence of the house felt heavy, suffocating. Julian was there, leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone with a half-eaten sandwich in front of him. He looked up, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. the smile of a man who knows something is wrong but hopes that if he ignores it, it will go away. "You're late," he said, not accusingly, just factually. "Dad called, said you missed the wrap-up meeting." I put my bag down on the island, the leather making a sharp thud against the granite. "I didn't miss it, Julian. I overheard it." He paused, the sandwich halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly. "Ard what?" "Your father," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm, detached, like I was reciting a grocery list. "He's giving the Apex initiative to Cole, Mitch's son. The kid who graduated 3 weeks ago with a degree in communications and a minor in beer pong." Julian winced. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous tic he'd had since we were dating. "Okay, look, he mentioned something about that at dinner the other night. I didn't want to bring it up because I knew you'd get worked up." "Worked up," I repeated, the volume of my voice rising incrementally. "I built the architecture, Julian. I sourced the vendors. I wrote the code for the tracking dashboard on my weekends while you were golfing with him. And now he's handing it to a 22-year-old because he wants youthful energy." "It's just an internship thing, Elle," Julian said, walking over and trying to put his hands on my shoulders. I stepped back. He sighed. "Dad thinks Cole has potential. He wants to mentor him. You know how Dad gets with his legacy stuff. He wants to groom the next generation. It's not a slight against you. He trusts you to handle the nuts and bolts." "The nuts and bolts," I whispered. "The actual work." "It's a compliment," Julian insisted, fully buying into the narrative his father had spun. "He knows the place would fall apart without you. He just wants someone flashy for the client meetings. Let the kid play executive for a few months. What's the harm?" The harm was that playing executive involved handling sensitive supplier relationships that I had spent 3 years nurturing. The harm was that Raymond was effectively demoting me to a glorified secretary, while a boy who had never negotiated a contract in his life was about to be handed the keys to the kingdom. But as I looked at Julian, my husband, who was so desperate for his father's approval that he would watch his wife be humiliated just to keep the peace, something inside me shifted. The hot, burning rage cooled into something harder, something brittle and sharp. They thought I was just the nuts and bolts girl. They thought I was the functional daughter-in-law who would keep the engine running while they painted flames on the hood. "You're right," I said softly, turning away to pour myself a glass of water. "Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should just focus on my specific duties." Julian exhaled, relief washing over him. "Exactly. Just keep doing what you do best, Elle. The company needs you." I took a sip of water, staring at my reflection in the dark window above the sink. He was right. The company did need me. Specifically, they needed the relationships I held. They needed the legal frameworks I had authored. What Raymond and Julian had forgotten, what they had been too arrogant to even check, was the paperwork. I remembered the afternoon 3 months ago, sitting in the lawyer's office with the representative from North Axis, our biggest supplier. We were drafting the renewal for the steel components. The lawyer had asked about the key person clause I had inserted. "It's unusual to name a specific director as the sole authorized liaison for a corporate contract," the lawyer had said, peering over her spectacles. "Usually, we just say senior management." I had smiled then, a gut instinct warning me even back then that my position in the Vance family was precarious. "Let's keep it specific," I had told her. "These relationships are personal. I want to ensure continuity. If I'm not the one managing the account, the terms should adjust." Julian turned back to his sandwich, oblivious to the fact that his wife was currently mentally reviewing the termination clauses of 5 different million-dollar contracts. "Okay," I said, turning back to him with a smile that felt like a razor blade. "I'll help Cole. I'll show him exactly where everything is." But they had forgotten one crucial thing. You can hand someone the map, but if you've rigged the bridge to collapse, they're still going down. To understand why the arrival of Cole felt like a knife to the chest, you have to understand the last 3 years. When I married Julian, Vance Logistics was a family-owned circus, held together by duct tape and nepotism. It was running on Google Sheets, crossed fingers, and the sheer force of Raymond's personality. The processes were sticky notes on monitors. The inventory management was a guy named Dave walking through the warehouse and guessing how many pallets were left. I didn't just join the company, I excavated it. I came from a background in high-level supply chain management. I had worked for Fortune 500s. I took a massive pay cut to help the family, believing the promise that we were building a legacy together. I spent the first year auditing 20 years of bad bookkeeping. I spent the second year firing the 3 cousins who were on the payroll but hadn't shown up to work since the Obama administration. I spent the third year building the automated pipeline that finally made the company profitable. And for 3 years, Raymond treated me like a wildly successful unpaid intern. He loved the optics of keeping me at ground level. It allowed him to play the noble king, doling out opportunities to outsiders to show how fair and unbiased he was, while keeping his own house under strict, humiliating control. He called it paying your dues. I called it exploitation with a Thanksgiving dinner invite. Then came Monday. Cole arrived with the fanfare of a returning war hero, despite his only battle experience being a hangover from his fraternity formal. He was tall, blonde, and possessed teeth so white they looked like they were vibrating. He wore a suit that cost more than my car, and he walked with the unearned confidence of a man who has never been told no in his entire life. Raymond paraded him through the office like a show pony. "Everyone, this is Cole," Raymond boomed, clapping the boy on the back. "He's going to be spearheading our new strategic direction on the Apex initiative. He's got fresh ideas, big vision." I sat in my cubicle, watching through the gap in the partition. I saw the seasoned warehouse managers exchange tired glances. I saw Sarah from accounting nervously clutch her ledger. Then Raymond stopped at my desk. "Elena," he chirped, his voice sickeningly sweet. "This is Cole. I want you to get him set up. Give him access to the drives, show him the ropes. He's going to be taking the lead on vendor relations, so make sure he has the contact list." Cole looked down at me. He didn't offer a handshake. He just gave a little 2-finger wave and grinned. "Hey, Elena, Ray talks about you a lot, says you're the organizer." "The organizer." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "I'm the director of operations, Cole. Welcome aboard." Right, Cole said, his eyes already drifting over my shoulder to the corner office, my intended office, that Raymond had just assigned to him. "So, hey, I'm gonna need the logins for the supplier portals. Ray said we need to renegotiate the North Axis deal to squeeze out some better margins for the new rollout." I felt a cold chill. Squeeze North Axis? I had spent 8 months building trust with that firm. They didn't squeeze, they walked. "North Axis is a delicate relationship," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's structured on a fixed margin agreement. If you try to reopen the negotiation now, you risk voiding the exclusivity tier." Raymond stepped in, his face darkening slightly. "Elena, don't bore the kid with the fine print. That's why he's here, to shake things up. We've been too passive. Give him the logins. Let him work his magic." He turned to Cole, winking. "She worries. That's her job. Your job is to win." They walked away, laughing. I heard Cole ask, "So, does she make the coffee too, or?" Raymond's laughter echoed down the hall. I sat back down. My hands were perfectly still now. I looked at my computer screen, where the central database for the North Axis contract was open. I looked at the field labeled Authorized Contract Administrator. It currently read, E. Vance. I looked at the subclause under Section 9, Personnel Continuity. In the event that E. Vance is removed from the lead liaison position, or if the liaison role is transferred to a party with less than 5 years of certified industry experience, this contract shall immediately revert to standard market rates, base plus 15%, and all exclusivity guarantees are null and void. Raymond didn't know it was there. He never read the contracts. He just signed where I pointed. Give him the logins, I whispered to myself. I opened the user management panel. I created a new profile for Cole. I gave him admin rights, but only to the front-end dashboard, the pretty graphs, the colorful charts. I kept the backend, the legal, the compliance, the renewal triggers, locked under my biometric ID. If they wanted the keys to the car, fine, I'd give them the keys. But they didn't realize I was the one who had designed the engine, and without me, they weren't driving a Ferrari. They were sitting in a very expensive paperweight. The fuse was lit. All I had to do now was wait for the spark. The transition didn't happen overnight. It happened in a series of agonizingly stupid micro-decisions that I was forced to watch in high-definition silence. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own department. I sat in my cubicle, stripping my personal files from the local server and backing up every single email, memo, and authorized sign-off I had ever received. I called it digital hygiene. In reality, I was building a war chest. Cole's version of innovation looked suspiciously like corners being cut with a dull knife. His first move was to cancel the weekly vendor alignment calls. Waste of time, he told the team, spinning in his new ergonomic chair. We can just automate. The updates, send them a Google form. I didn't say a word. I just noted the date and time in my black notebook. Item 1, removal of relational touchpoints with Tier 1 suppliers. Then came the software. Cole decided that my custom-built logistics dashboard, the one that integrated perfectly with our warehouse scanners, was clunky and visually dated. He used the company credit card to subscribe to a flashy, cloud-based project management tool that he'd seen in a YouTube ad. He insisted everyone migrate to it immediately. It uses AI to predict shipping lanes, Cole bragged during a lunch meeting, his mouth full of a turkey wrap. It's going to save us 12% on fuel. Does it integrate with the legacy ERP system North Axis uses? I asked quietly, not looking up from my salad. Cole scoffed. Elena, everything integrates, it's the cloud. It did not, in fact, integrate. I watched as the warehouse manager, a 60-year-old man named Frank who had hands like baseball mitts and zero patience for nonsense, tried to scan a pallet of automotive glass. The scanner beeped an error code. The new AI system hadn't generated a manifest because it couldn't read North Axis's old-school barcoding. Elena, Frank radioed me, panic edging into his voice. I got 3 trucks waiting at the dock. The system says these pallets don't exist. Call Cole, I replied, my voice calm, steady, and utterly devoid of helpfulness. He's the project lead. I did, he said, to just override it manually. Then do that, Frank. Elena, if I manually override a serialized shipment, we lose the insurance tracking. You know that. I do know that, Frank, but I'm just the nuts and bolts. You have your orders. I hung up. Then I opened the North Axis Master Agreement PDF on my screen. I scrolled to Section 14, Liability and Insurance. Any shipment processed without automated serialized tracking verification is deemed at-risk cargo. In the event of damage, loss, or delay of at-risk cargo, the purchaser, Vance Logistics, assumes 100% liability. Furthermore, habitual manual overriding, defined as 3 or more instances in a quarter, constitutes a breach of safety protocols, triggering an automatic suspension of credit terms. I printed the page. I highlighted the paragraph in neon yellow. Then I placed it in a folder marked Do Not Open Until Emergency. I wasn't just investigating Cole's incompetence. I was documenting the systemic dismantling of the company's legal protections. I realized then that my value to Raymond wasn't just that I did the work. It was that I acted as a human shield against his own negligence. And I was about to step out of the line of fire. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks into Cole's reign of terror. I was in the break room making tea when Raymond stormed in, his face a mottled shade of crimson. He was holding a printout, a penalty invoice from a freight carrier. "What is this?" he demanded, shaking the paper at me. $3,000 in demurrage fees? We haven't paid demurrage fees in 2 years, Alina. I took a slow sip of my tea, Earl Grey, hot. I wouldn't know, Raymond. I'm not managing the freight schedules anymore. Cole is. Cole says you didn't give him the access codes for the Port Authority portal, Raymond shouted. He says the trucks were sitting there because you locked him out. I set my mug down. The porcelain made a sharp clack against the counter. I gave Cole the login sheet on day 1, I said, my voice dropping an octave, turning ice cold. If he couldn't figure out how to navigate the two-factor authentication, that's a competence issue, not an access issue. And regarding the fees, those happened because he routed the drivers to the wrong terminal. I saw the dispatch email. He guessed. He's learning, Raymond roared, slamming his hand on the table. He's a kid. You're supposed to be guiding him, not watching him fail. You're sabotaging this company out of spite because I didn't give you a shiny title. Spite, I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Raymond, I built this department. I negotiated the rates that pay for your country club membership. I structured the deals that bought Cole that ridiculous ergonomic chair. You didn't just deny me a title. You looked at my life's work and handed it to a child because you think biology is a substitute for skill. You are my daughter-in-law, he spat. You owe this family. I owe you nothing but the professional courtesy of a 2-week notice, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. The refrigerator hummed. Someone in the hallway laughed, oblivious to the bomb that had just detonated. Raymond blinked, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. What? I reached into my bag and pulled out the white envelope I had been carrying for 7 days. I slid it across the breakroom table. I resign, I said. Effective 2 weeks from today, I've drafted a transition plan. It's on T. He's server. Raymond stared at the envelope. He didn't pick it up. He looked at me with a mix of disbelief and condescension, as if a toaster had just tried to negotiate a salary. You can't quit, he scoffed. Don't be dramatic, Alina. You're emotional. Go home, take a personal day. We'll talk when you've calmed down. I'm not emotional, Raymond. I'm expensive, and as of 2 weeks from now, I'm unavailable. You think you can just walk away? He stepped closer, towering over me, using his physical size to intimidate. It was a tactic that had worked on suppliers for years. You're a Vance. You walk away, you're walking away from everything. The family, the legacy, Julian. Leave Julian out of this, I warned. Julian does what I tell him, Raymond sneered. And if you leave, you're done. I will blackball you in this industry. I know everyone in this town. You won't get a job managing a hot dog stand by the time I'm done with you. I looked him dead in the eye. Raymond, in this industry, people care about 2 things, margin and reliability. You have neither, I have both. I turned and walked out. He shouted something after me, something about loyalty and ungrateful women, but I kept walking. I went straight to my desk, typed a quick email to HR, which was just Raymond's sister, Linda, and hit send. Then I did the most important thing. I opened the North Axis internal portal, the one only I had the super admin keys to, and I flagged my profile status, pending termination. I didn't revoke access. I didn't delete files. I simply told the system the truth. The authorized liaison was leaving the building. The system, programmed by the rigid, ironclad logic of contract law, did exactly what I had told it to do 3 years ago. It initiated the liaison void protocol. The fallout wasn't immediate. That's the thing about logistics. The rot takes a few days to travel down the supply chain. For the first week of my notice period, Raymond ignored me. He acted as if my resignation was a temper tantrum that would blow over. He stopped inviting me to meetings. He routed all emails to Cole. He even took the team out for a morale-boosting lunch and didn't invite me. Julian was a wreck. He came home every night looking like a kicked puppy. Dad is furious, Julian said on Thursday night, picking at his lasagna. He says you're trying to humiliate him. He wants you to apologize and rescind the letter. And what do you want, Julian? I asked, cutting my food with precision. I want peace, El. I want my wife and my dad to stop fighting, Can't you just stay, for me? Dad says he'll give you a raise. 5%. 5%, I repeated. Cole is making 20% more than me right now, Julian. I saw the payroll budget. Julian went silent. He knew. He had known the whole time and said nothing. That silence was the final nail in the coffin of my guilt. By the second week, the atmosphere in the office shifted from cold shoulder to active panic. It started with North Axis. I was packing up my personal items, photos, a potted succulent, my framed certification, when Cole came sprinting down the hallway. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His hair was messy. He looked, for the first time, like the 22-year-old he was. "Elena," he gasped, skidding to a halt at my cubicle. "The portal, it's broken." "Which portal?" I asked, placing a stapler into my box. "North Axis, I'm trying to place the Q3 steel order. The system," it locked me out, "it says unauthorized user pricing active. And the prices, Elena, the prices are wrong. They're showing list price. That's 15% higher than our contract rate." I paused. I looked at him with a mild, detached curiosity. "Well, that sounds right." "Right, it wipes out our entire margin. We're bidding on the assumption of the discount. If we pay list price, we lose money on every unit we ship." "That's how contracts work, Cole. The discount was contingent on specific conditions." "What conditions? We're buying the same amount of steel." "But you're not buying it through the authorized liaison," I said. Cole stared at me, his mouth agape. "What?" "Clause 9.2, I recited from memory. Preferential pricing is tied to the certified liaison's continuous oversight. If the liaison changes without a 30-day vetting period and written approval from North Axis Legal, the account reverts to standard commercial terms." Cole turned pale. You're the liaison." "I was, but since I'm leaving, and since no one filed the paperwork to vet you, which takes 6 weeks, by the way, the system did what it was designed to do. It protected North Axis from an unvetted buyer." "Fix it," Cole demanded, his voice cracking. "Log in and fix it." "I can't. My status is pending termination. The system won't let me override a void protocol unless I rescind my resignation." "Then rescind it," Raymond's voice boomed. He had appeared behind Cole, smelling of stress, sweat, and stale coffee. "Rescind the letter, Elena. Fix the pricing. We'll talk about your title later." I looked at the two of them, the king and his chosen heir, panic in their eyes. "No," I said. Raymond's face twisted. "If you don't fix this, I will sue you for corporate sabotage." "It's not sabotage, Raymond. It's the contract you signed." I picked up my box. "And actually, it gets worse." "Worse," Raymond whispered. "Yes, North Axis isn't the only one. The exclusivity deal with Apex? That was contingent on my APICS certification. The insurance waiver for the warehouse? That S tied to my safety record. When I walk out that door on Friday, you don't just lose the discount. You lose the insurance. You lose the exclusivity. You become just another customer in a sea of customers, paying full price and waiting in line." "You set a trap," Raymond hissed. "I didn't set a trap. I built a safety net. You just decided to cut the ropes while I was still holding them." I walked past them. "Where are you going?" Raymond shouted. "We're not done." "I am," I said over my shoulder. "I have a lunch meeting." "With who?" I stopped at the glass doors. I turned back, letting a small, genuine smile touch my lips. "With the vice president of North Axis. She wants to discuss my new consulting firm. Apparently, they prefer working with the nuts and bolts directly." I pushed the door open and walked out into the sunlight. I left them standing in the fluorescent gloom of the empire they thought they owned, listening to the sound of phones starting to ring. The summons to the emergency board meeting didn't come from Raymond. It came from Marcus Sterling, the chairman of the board, a man who had always looked at Raymond with the polite tolerance one reserves for a loud child in a library. The email was brief. regarding the catastrophic operational halt and the North Axis contract default. Your presence is requested to clarify the liability architecture. I didn't have to go. I was a private citizen now. But I went because I knew that if I didn't, Raymond would spend 3 hours spinning a narrative that I was a vindictive hacker who had maliciously destroyed the company mainframe. I needed to clear my name, and quite frankly, I wanted a front-row seat to the finale. I walked into the boardroom at 9:00 a.m. on a Monday. The atmosphere was funeral grim. The long mahogany table, usually polished to a mirror shine, was cluttered with panicked reports, red-lined financial statements, and empty coffee cups. Raymond sat at the head of the table, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His tie was loosened, his eyes were bloodshot, and his usual ruddy complexion had faded to a sickly gray. To his right sat Cole, who looked physically ill. The boy was staring at his hands, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. Julian was there too, sitting at the far end, looking miserable. When I entered, he looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and desperation, but he didn't speak. "Ms. Vance," Marcus Sterling said, nodding to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table from Raymond. "Thank you for coming." "I'm happy to help clarify things," I said, setting my leather portfolio on the table. The sound echoed in the silent room. "Clarify," Raymond snapped, his voice hoarse. "She's here to gloat. She locked us out, Marcus. She put a kill switch in the software." "I did no such thing," I replied calmly, taking my seat. "I simply enforced the security protocols that you signed off on, Raymond." Marcus raised a hand to silence Raymond. "We are currently facing a Class A supply chain failure. North Axis has suspended shipments. Fulcrum Dynamics has invoked a penalty clause costing us $40,000 a day. And our 3 largest clients have put us on probation. Raymond claims this is because you hid the access keys." I opened my portfolio. I pulled out a single, thick binder. "The access keys," I said, sliding the binder across the table to Marcus, "are in the standard transition document I emailed to Raymond, Cole, and HR on my last day. Page 4, paragraph 2. Marcus opened the binder. He flipped to the page. He adjusted his glasses. "It says here," Marcus read, "that full administrative access requires a biometric handover, which must be scheduled with the outgoing director. Did you schedule this, Raymond?" Raymond sputtered. I was busy. She should have just left the passwords on a sticky note." "Security Protocol 101, I interjected. "Never write down passwords, especially not for a system that manages $12 million in inventory." I offered 3 times to do the handover. Cole canceled all 3 meetings. All eyes turned to Cole. He shrank into his chair. I thought we could just reset it with it," he whispered. "You thought," Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously low. "You thought you could bypass the security architecture of our entire logistics network." "It's not just the passwords," one of the investors spoke up, a woman named Linda who had always been sharp. "It's the contracts. Elena, why is North Axis charging us retail?" "Because," I said, turning to her, "the discount was a personal concession. I spent 3 years building a relationship with their VP of operations. The contract explicitly states that the discount is tied to trusted oversight. When Raymond replaced a 15-year industry veteran with I glanced at Cole. With a recent graduate, the trust evaporated, and so did the discount." "We can fix it," Raymond shouted, standing up. "I'll call them. I'll tell them it's a temporary transition." "You already called them, Raymond," I said softly. "I spoke to Carmen at North Axis this morning. She told me you screamed at her assistant and threatened to sue them. Is that correct?" The silence in the room was absolute. Raymond's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "You threatened our primary steel supplier?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "They were being unreasonable," Raymond defended. "They wouldn't honor the deal." "They honored the contract," I corrected. "You just didn't read it." Then came the final blow. The secretary entered the room, looking pale. She walked over to Marcus and handed him a note. Marcus read it, he closed his eyes, he took a deep breath. That was the CEO of Hexler Heavy Industries, Marcus said, placing the note on the table. Raymond perked up. Hexler, good, they're our anchor client, I'm sure they understand. They are terminating their contract effective immediately, Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the air like a guillotine. They are citing operational instability and lack of confidence in leadership. They are moving their entire logistics portfolio to a new boutique firm. Marcus looked at me. Vance and Associates, is that you, Alina? I nodded slowly. It is. They reached out to me on Tuesday. They said they couldn't afford to have their supply chain managed by an intern. Raymond looked at me with pure hatred. You stole them. You stole my client. I didn't steal anything, Raymond. They left. They walked out of the burning building you set on fire. I just happened to be standing outside with a fire extinguisher. Marcus stood up. He looked at Raymond, then at Cole. Raymond, I think you and I need to have a private conversation about the future of your tenure as CEO. And Cole, you're dismissed. Pack your things. Cole stood up, tears actually welling in his eyes, and ran out of the room. Raymond looked at me, desperate now. Alina, please, we can work this out. I'll give you the title. I'll give you the raise, just bring Hexler back. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I looked at the man who had treated me like a servant for 3 years, who had belittled my intelligence and exploited my labor. I'm afraid I can't do that, Raymond, I said. My consulting fee is quite high, and honestly, you can't afford me anymore. I turned to Julian. He was looking at me with awe and a profound, crushing regret. I didn't say anything to him, not yet. I walked out of the boardroom, the sound of Raymond's shouting fading behind me as the heavy oak doors clicked shut. The collapse of the old regime at Vance Logistics was swift and brutal. Without the North Axis discount and the Hexler revenue, the company's cash flow seized up within a month. The board voted Raymond out 3 weeks after the meeting. He was forced into early retirement, his golden parachute significantly reduced to cover the legal fees and contract penalties he had incurred. He didn't lose his house, but he lost his reputation. In our town, that was worse. He became the man who sank his own ship because he was too proud to let a woman steer it. He spent his days golfing alone, as even Mitch, Cole's father, stopped taking his calls after Cole's disastrous internship became public knowledge. As for me, Vance and Associates flourished. It turns out, when you spend 3 years doing the work of 5 people, doing the work of 1 person yourself feels like a vacation. I hired Sarah from accounting and Frank from the warehouse. We ran a tight ship. We were profitable by the end of the first quarter. But the real resolution didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened on a Tuesday evening, 6 weeks after I had walked out. I was working late in my new office, a converted loft with exposed brick and actual windows. The doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was Julian. I hesitated. We had been living separately since the resignation. He had stayed at our house. I had rented a small apartment. We had spoken only through text, mostly about bills. I buzzed him in. He walked up the stairs, holding a small box. He looked different. He wasn't wearing the suits his father liked him to wear. He was wearing jeans and a simple button-down. He looked tired, but or the first time in years, he looked like himself. Hi, he said, standing in the doorway. Hi, I replied, leaning back in my chair. He stepped inside and placed the box on my desk. It was a peace offering, my favorite tea, the expensive kind from the import shop downtown. I quit, he said. I blinked. You what? I quit the company, today. Marcus asked me to stay on, to help transition the new management, but I told him I couldn't. Why? I asked. Because I realized something, Julian said, his voice shaking slightly. I realized that I spent my whole life trying to be the son my father wanted, and in the process, I became a husband who didn't deserve you. He took a step closer, his eyes wet. I watched him humiliate you, Alina, for years, and I told myself it was just his way. I told myself you were strong enough to take it. But that's not the point, is it? You shouldn't have had to be strong. You should have been protected. By me. I felt a lump form in my throat. This was the apology I had waited 3 years to hear. I'm sorry, he whispered. I am so sorry. I don't care about the legacy. I don't care about the inheritance. I want to be the guy who stands up for his wife. He looked around the office. You built this. You did it all on your own. You're incredible, Elle. And I know I have a lot of work to do to earn back a spot in your life. But I'm applying for jobs. Real jobs, not nepotism handouts. I want to start over. I looked at him. I saw the man I had fallen in love with before the weight of his father's expectations had crushed his spine. I saw the sincerity in his eyes. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a dimmer. It doesn't happen all at once. But as I looked at Julian, stripped of his father's influence, standing before me with nothing but his own regret and a box of tea, I felt the anger finally begin to recede. You have a lot of work to do, I agreed softly. I know, he said. I'm ready. I stood up and walked around the desk. I didn't hug him, not yet, but I reached out and took his hand. Start by putting the kettle on, I said. We have a lot to talk about. Julian smiled, a real tentative smile. He squeezed my hand. Yes, ma'am. Vindication is sweet and success is satisfying. But the greatest victory wasn't watching Raymond fall. It was watching the people I cared about finally stand up, shake off the dust, and realize that true worth isn't inherited. It's built. And I had built a life that no one could ever take away from me again.